Hello, everybody. Good morning, good evening, from wherever you are. My name is Dolphin Magiro from the Green Youth Climate Fund Institution. We are back from COP27, basically. Welcome. Happy for those that we haven't had the opportunity to meet. We are doing a reflections webinar, basically a reflection session, basically to touch on the key issues, basically what happened at COP27. We thought that this would be the best time to do a reflections webinar and not the usual webinars, basically because we should have had enough time to sort of reflect, basically within our own institutions, organizations, on actually the outputs of COP27 in relation to climate finance, and basically what those output means for us and for the entire climate change community and the climate change activists, and of course for young people. So joining me here today is my colleague Manzi Dennis from Uganda, who will support this reflection. So we intend to take the shortest amount of time because it's a reflection webinar, not an actual webinar. We're expecting one more guest from Climate Policy Initiative. I think she might be having a bit of technical issues, but she will join us as the session goes. So with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague Manzi Dennis from Uganda to tell us a bit about himself, what he does, and what he does, his interest in climate finance issues, so that after that, then we can be able to sort of dive deep into, of course, the webinar session. So Dennis, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Manzi Dennis, as she said, from Uganda. I'm a passionate advocate for sustainable development with key interest in climate change. That is the area of financing. I've done research so much about climate financing and policies. And I want to see young people taking on action for a safer future. It's only us, the young people, who are going to be the next leaders and who are supposed to take up initiatives to have a sustainable future. By profession, I'm a procurement specialist. Yeah. And I lead teams I lead teams and working groups which do sustainable procurement according to the guidelines established by the UN.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Dennis is joining us from Uganda. It's interesting to know that you're in procurement, and I think that what you do basically is really important, especially in this time when climate change is starting to be mainstreamed in basically every aspect and every space within society. I'd like to give the floor to my colleague Grace from Tanzania to tell us a bit about herself and her interest in climate finance. So Grace, because we're doing sort of a roundtable, the floor is yours to introduce yourself and what you do. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you, Dolphin. My name is Grace Busasi from Tanzania, a colleague to Dolphin Magero. I'm currently in Tanzania practicing an internship on environmental impact and assessment. Well, I'll talk a little bit on my vision on youth climate engagement in climate change. I think that youth are more powerful when we have more time to put the effort in limiting impacts, especially negative impacts on climate change. So we should focus on it and try to get finance from sponsors so that we may be able to meet the goal.
Thank you very much, Grace. Thank you very much, Dennis. I think I'll just dive deep into. We're going to touch on just a brush of issues that came out of COP28, basically. I am hoping that Dennis had an opportunity to look at COP28. Also, the Green Youth Climate Fund team has a very robust report, and we're basically following the negotiations. So I'll just dive straight into it. And the first, of course, when you talk about issues of climate finance, the first thing that comes to someone's mind is the Green Climate Fund, the GCF. So one of the issues that rose from the GCF negotiations at COP28 was concern over direct access entities not bringing enough proposals, basically. So direct access entities are sort of national entities. So basically organizations, which means that organizations, nationally registered organizations in our countries, basically are not putting in a pipeline of proposals. So this is affecting issues of access. What I would like to maybe ask Dennis to, for example, what is his perspective on this issue? Because developing countries are claiming that as Africa and the developing nations, we are not putting in enough proposals, basically, to be able to be funded. So I don't know if Dennis could comment on that, basically. And I'd also like to ask Grace to help us reflect, basically. Do you think that in general, if these organizations who are the older generation are having trouble basically submitting proposals basically for funding for climate change, where does that leave us young people? Because we are supposed to sort of follow in the footsteps and expect a bit of guidance from, of course, the older generation. So I'd start with Dennis, and then Grace could help me reflect. What is your take on that, Dennis? The direct access entities not bringing in enough proposals. So Dennis, the floor is yours. Then we'll go back to Grace.
Well, thank you so much for that good question. For the bigger economies, it is essential to support the projects and programs of young people in line with climate change. It is no doubt implementation of the existing commitments is a setup of the first priorities. But going forward, young people are always missing out on projects which are supposed to be taken up by developed countries to implement or to acquire funding. In fact, beyond fiscal policies, building adaptation resilience for the projects which are submitted by young people is also important. Today we could be here discussing climate finance, discussing climate funds, but we have not, as young people, reached out to institutions which are willing to boost or to support projects by young people. We have institutions like the East African Development Bank. I'll speak in the context of our region. I've read some material. It is picking up on projects which are supposed to be supported by young people. I've seen the African Development Bank also coming on board in the context of procurement. I'll speak in the context of procurement. 75% of procurement done, whether in when grant, supposed to be with guidelines established within the climate change mandate. They are supposed to, all procurement must be climate responsive. So in this regard, policymakers, politicians, opinion leaders, everyone, youth leaders, youth activists, they have to come on board, establish formidable policies. Here, I mean like discussions be in hotels, boardrooms, but without their policies, institutions with funding. We have institutions like the World Bank. It has already a vibrant climate change policy. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, but you're breaking off a bit. But just continue. We can hear you. We can hear you. Yes, I think it's the network.
Yeah. Thank you. To continue with what I was saying, the World Bank has availed funding projects which are in developing countries. A country like Uganda here, an example of a project which has benefited from World Bank funding, it's the air quality in Kampala city. Some young people came up with that project, but I'll shift the blame to young people. We have not shifted our mindset from from okay, everyone is talking about tree planting. No, it's not the only way to go. As Africa, our tradition is known for agriculture. I'll speak like most countries are more so in agriculture, and you realize the climate change is always by the agriculture, and that is green bond houses. In this regard, young people should innovate new ways, come up with new programs away from tree planting, which has been happening. Yes, we have planted trees. Government agreements have been signed to plant trees. They have been fulfilled. We can now make a shift from that thinking and avail new programs. It could be like there's a new program running with Unica. That is education can't wait. Yes, if a young person is not educated, they will not understand what climate change means. And with these reflections around, we have really to up the game. We have to avail new energy now. From COP 28, 27, I mean, we need, by the time we reach to next COP, young people must be having like tangible solutions away from attending the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that input. I feel like what you're talking about is that we lack enough innovation basically as young people, as Africa, because it feels like there's monopoly. People just feel like climate change is all about planting trees, but from what you're saying, it's beyond planting trees, basically, which I actually agree with you. So that would probably, do you think that this could be the reason why, if we don't have the innovations, we might be lobbying at these international conferences at COPs for financing, but then again, we don't have the innovations to submit to be funded. So this could be, from what you're saying, could be a possible reason why, of course, there isn't a pipeline of proposal, because if young people don't want to think beyond tree planting and into innovative ways, basically access to financing becomes a very key challenge. So I actually like your perspective on this particular issue, because it's a concern that was raised actually by the developed countries during the review of the GCF, basically, and they were saying that you want money, but basically you're not bringing proposals because you might not have capacity. So, in your perspective, before we jump on to the next question, what do you think needs to be done to stir up that sort of innovation that would sort of boost proposals from direct access entities to be able to access this source of funding? From basically your perspective, what do you think needs to be done to boost the innovativeness of young people to be able to, and of course of the rest of the countries, to be able to increase the number of proposals, basically? Yes. So Manzi.
Well, thank you. You were breaking a bit in the network, but I think I had something scaling up projects.
Yes, that, and also maybe I could be a bit more louder. My question is that what do you think needs to be done, basically, for young people to be more innovative, to inspire young people to be more innovative, so that we think beyond tree planting? Basically, from your perspective, from basically where you sit, what do you think that needs to be done to start innovation among young people beyond climate change, beyond tree growing on climate change?
Well, thank you so much. Uh, I firmly believe that largely so many sectors doing well. An example of the renewable sector, renewable energy. We have the transport sector. I'll come to detail after. We have oh yeah. Let me speak in the context of transport sector. Mobility. Everyone travels. We have seen people coming up with innovations of model like we're here in Kampala. We have something called Kayola bus, the popular known as Kayola bus. It's an electric car, does not use fuel, so everyone is eager to use the Kayola bus because of that innovativeness. We have we have in the renewable sector, you can surely see the energy sector is growing at a high rate. It is projected by 2030, if we go under the 2 degree scenario, employment will be growing like in the renewable sector beyond normal. The other field of innovation will go to the other field of innovation can come to the area of the quality of air. Projects under the projects in quality of air, projects in renewable sector, that's energy, projects in transport, with with the brilliance of young people in those four sectors, they become unstoppable. The other thing which seems to be left out behind is the aligning policies of climate financing with banking institutions, more so the multinationals. If we have aligned policies, it will make it easy for credit access for young people, and their projects will be adapted.
Uh, Yeah, I think you're bringing out very valid points. Issues of credit and also alignment with policies. Policies are actually very important when you're looking to sort of increase the attractiveness and allow sort of in the creating enabling environment agenda, basically, to be able to access climate financing and also basically support innovation of young people. So I will quickly jump on to the next reflection point, and it is based on the adaptation fund, basically. So another concern that came out of COP28, it came basically, there's a complaint by developing nations that there are more pledges than commitments when it comes to the adaptation fund, because they initially had pledged around 350 million, but only 158 million had been availed, basically. And we know that now the adaptation fund now is looking to solve the Paris Agreement. What do you think? How do you think that? First of all, how do you think that this 158 million, because Africa has been crying about adaptation and adaptation funding, how do you think this money, given that it now serves the Paris Agreement, is going to transform or inspire adaptation initiatives in Africa and countries like yours, like Uganda? And what is your what is your take on the adaptation issue agenda, basically, on especially developed nations basically not meeting their commitments? So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for that question. I think when it comes to that fund, yes, both countries usually commit and then they don't fulfill. That is the laxity with our leadership. You know, our leaders have not picked interest, like they have not had keen interest. The key word is interest here. They have not picked uh, that strong argument about climate change. The fund would be enough, but you find that the coalition formed for finance ministers, it has to be aligning with the economies of the developing countries. You have a minister from, I would say maybe, not in Africa, the finance minister not in Africa, aligning the economies to our African setting, and more so some low developing countries. So Africa has some most low developing countries. Alignment of the policies and economies, having clear objectives for the fund. You find even in an institution where the fund is supposed to be performing, they have not established structures. So it goes back us to us, the Africans, the leadership. I'll blame the leadership of our African countries, because even me, if I'm to give out a donation, I cannot have a donation coming without structures. There has to be a formulated structure, like the way you see IMF can lend, maybe Uganda, IMF can lend Kenya, but here the fund is always availed, but institutions or governments, even the private sectors, fail to pick interest in creating structure. So that's why you see uh, other countries have not meetings, but it's our duty as leaders to continue reminding them about their pledge.
Okay, that's very interesting. That's a very valid and strong point you're making. So basically, if I got you correct, you're saying that in as much as, yes, they don't meet their pledges, but also the buck stops with us as developing countries, those who are asking for the funds. So basically, we haven't formed, of course, the right structures to be able to allow the funds, basically, that we are lobbying for to be able to flow into our country so that to support basically implementation. And that actually brings a very critical point, basically. So, how do you see that the role of the finance ministers, the coalition of climate finance ministers? Because I know that in some countries, um, when you look at issues of climate change, the way it's organized within a country, it's majorly the Ministry of Environment. But when it comes to issues of climate finance, there's usually room for the Ministry of Economy, which is sometimes the Ministry of National Treasury. And it is in very few countries that we have, of course, the engagement of the Ministry of Economy, especially in Africa, getting involved on climate change issues because they feel like climate change is sort of an environmental issue and does not concern the finance issue. So those are some of the structures that I actually agree with you. So if basically you were to meet the coalition of climate finance ministers, basically, what recommendation would you give to them, basically, on how to better align, basically, to be able to enable the climate financing flow into basically to flow into our countries, basically, before we jump on to the next particular reflection point? Yes, what do you think, what advice would you give them, what would you say to them, the coalition of climate finance ministers?
Well, thank you so much. I think here the coalition for finance ministers, they should collectively work together without any difference. Yes, I know there's no difference in their performance of duties, but some institutions are
You're breaking off a bit. I think it's the network, but I'm hoping you'll be able to get you back. Um, that's a very interesting, valid point that Dennis was putting across the role of the existing. What existing structures do we need to basically utilize and enhance so that we can be able to ensure delivery of climate financing to developing countries? And what I wanted Dennis to give, if he were to meet the coalition of finance ministers, basically on issues of climate change, what message would he like basically to put across to this coalition of climate finance ministers in relation to increasing access to climate financing? Because what has been highlighted is that, of course, there are two issues when it comes to climate change. Dennis, you're back. I don't know if you can repeat your point. Sorry, we lost you there for a minute. You're talking about the coalition of climate finance ministers working together. So I don't know if you can be able to sum up on that so that we touch through the next reflection point.
Thank you. Sorry for that network problem. Yeah,
We
sorry.
understand. Those
We
are
from
African
Africa.
problems, yes.
Well, moving forward, I was saying there are three things we need to know here. The coalition for finance ministers has to be with involvement with the private sector. The involvement of private sector will help us identify sustainable and profitable projects amongst young people. And also, it's well known that within the highly demanded skills is interpersonal skills. So our coalition finance ministers to really this is a dynamic issue. Yeah. This is a dynamic issue. Anything to do with climate change has to really call for serious action. It calls for continuous engagement because people tend to forget. People tend to forget and move away from the serious issues. Now we have specific areas of climate change which are supposed to be handled. Mitigation.
We're losing you a bit. Yes. But Dennis was making a very valid point on basically the issue of engagement of the private sector, the sort of a multi-stakeholder engagement when it comes to issues of climate finance, which is very interesting. Yes, we broke off, but I think we really got your point because I was reiterating that you have just echoed that we needed to engage the private sector basically more on issues of climate change and climate finance basically, so that we can go to identify some initiatives and projects for young people basically within that. So to tie up that question basically, so that we finish the whole jargon around private sector, do you think that the Green Climate Fund adopted a private sector strategy basically. Do you think that this will open up room for SMEs? Because we know that young people, most SMEs in Africa and developing countries are owned by young people. Could there be an avenue for SMEs basically owned and run by young people to start engaging in the private sector aspect of issues of climate finance, basically? Because we know that climate finance is either is basically has, of course, the private sector part and also the public sector part. So do you think that the private sector strategy of the GCF could be an avenue for young people to be able to engage through, of course, their SMEs? Do you think it's a possibility, and do you think that we can be able to tap into that as an opportunity as young people in developing nations? Manzi, again to you. Hello, I don't know if you heard me. I don't know if you're able to hear me or if I'm breaking off. I was reiterating the issue of the private sector. Okay, so Dennis is having a bit of network issues. So yeah, like we were saying, the GCF also adopted our private sector strategy, and this could be a possible avenue for young people to engage through the SMEs, that the small and micro enterprises, because we know that in developing countries, SMEs basically are the largest. Young people are the largest owners and drivers of SMEs basically in Africa. So another thing that came out of basically COP28, basically as we wait for Dennis to come back online, on the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. So the NCQG is a post-2025 goal, because we know that the Paris Agreement set in 2015 was initially supposed to come into force from 2020, but our countries are not able to deliver on their commitment, so it was pushed to 2025. So one of the things that came out of COP28 was that developing country the climate change community would start to form a new goal from 2025 into the beyond. So basically, this goal is called the NCQG, the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. So the post-2025 goal is anticipated to be a goal that would be able to sort of be an all-inclusive goal and would be able to ensure the continuation of long-term climate finance, to be able to continue to be able to basically continue discussing issues of climate financing and support that should go towards issues of climate financing. And there are some contentious issues that came out of the NCQG, and one of them was that there was a push that it should include resources from South-South. So basically, these developing countries would be able to be contributors to this fund, which basically would sort of go in contrary to the CBDR principle. That's the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. So I wanted to get the perspective of young people on some of these contentious issues. And we're joined here today with Manzi from Uganda to help us reflect basically as young people. So Manzi, I was talking about the NCQG, the new goal, new collective quantified goal on climate finance, the post-2025 goal basically. And I had actually flagged an issue that came out of the discussions in COP28. And the issue was that there was an attempt to include resources from South-South. So I don't know, as a young person from the global South, what is your take on the potential that the NCQG would include resources from South-South? So basically, developing countries would be contributors to the post-2025 goal. What do you think about this particular move and this particular issue that came out of COP28? So Manzi, the floor is yours. I don't know if you heard me. I know it's a bit of network issues. Yes. So Manzi is having a lot of technical issues. Our other speakers are also having a bit of technical issues. I don't know if Manzi would be able to talk something about the NCQG. So Manzi, I'd like to get your reflections on the NCQG, the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. What do you think about it as a young person from developing uh, from developing countries, from Africa per se? So what is your take on the NCQG?
To start with, it's a good.
You've muted yourself. Yes, unmute kindly. Yes.
Oh yeah, thank you. Network has been a problem here. I don't know why it is
Yes.
disturbing me today,
We understand.
but
We understand.
to supplement on the question you just asked, it is a good initiative to Africa and the world at large. In the context of Africa, this is something which has been waited for so long. It has been something waited for so long. Yeah. Thankfully, it was discussed, and we hope it will see light at the end. I encourage young people to really adapt it because we are we are the people to shape the future. We have to create the pathway. We have to create the pathway for young people, and without focusing at the collectiveness of climate change issues, then we are missing the goal.
Okay, thank you very much for that valuable input. I think I agree with Manzi because it's an opportunity for young people to engage because we know that the other goals, basically the Paris Agreement, was more focused on two groups. That's the developed and the developing countries, basically. And then we'd have, of course, the non-state actors. But I think the NCQG, of course, gives basically a new perspective and a new approach into some of these issues. And the approach that they give is that the NCQG basically is going to be an all-inclusive in terms of inclusion of the climate finance ministers, of course, that Dennis highlighted. We have the non-state actors, the youth, basically, especially within the technical expert dialogue, so that we can be able to craft and be able to sort of be able to be contributors to this particular issue. There's a few risks that come in terms of if it's that open, basically, are people going to take up responsibility for emitting because it is sort of opening up the pool to a wider stakeholder? It basically means that we expect a wide source of financing and funding and support to go to issues of climate change. To conclude, basically, we have the GCF, of course, which is, of course, the Envy Fund when it comes to issues of climate change. Basically, the GCF, an update that happened at COP28 was that the GCF was going to provide an early stage startup money financing in developing nations. What do you think, Dennis, this means for young people? Because the GCF is pledging to give us sort of an early stage startup for developing countries. And there was a strong push initially within the negotiations that the GCF, of course, would be able to move. There was an attempt to move the GCF from a core financier, which is what it has been operating to a core investor. So, do you think that the move by GCF to provide early stage startup in developing countries is a shift towards the GCF slowly moving towards being a core investor or do you think it's an opportunity that young people need to tap and leverage on and look at it from the positive side? So what's your take on that, Manzi?
Well, thank you so much, Oli. Mechanism, first of all, it's a good mechanism. The GCF, it has to boost action among young people uh, and scale up their global level. This it has been long overdue. We urgently needed this. The, G, the GCF, its funding being, I think it's streamlined for it. It is streamlined very well. That is for young people. Once they have a sustainable project, it is easily recognized. That is to say, uh, the fund is always available because the commitment is already made. I suppose the commitment once is fulfilled and the fund is available, young people at the state of it, they will benefit surely. And then Africa as a whole, some of these mechanisms put in place, the message has not reached further. You can imagine now today in my community here, if I speak about the GCF, yes, I can take through some people what does, how is it, how does it work, but our strategic leadership at the most top, they have not they have not done that publicity, that awareness. You usually see the great seven countries, the G7 countries coming to sit in meetings, but well, the message is not disseminated to the final final people like the end user. So first of all, the mechanism is good, the fund is good, and without a doubt, young people are going to benefit. And it's in best interest of people who look at climate change issues with an helicopter view. Yeah, countries which are not focusing at that, they are going to miss out.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think I actually agree with you. Totally agree with you. Basically, we need to be very open minded. With basically what we get. So just to conclude, because this was sort of a reflection webinar, just giving out 1, 2, 3 key things that happened at COP28, basically, or COP27, rather, basically. I don't know if Manzi, you'd have any last final remarks before we wrap up the of course, the reflections session. Basically, what stood out for you at COP28 with the negotiations, on, particularly with issues on climate finance and also something on the broader climate change discussions and engagement? So, what actually stood out to you, Manzi?
Oh, thank you so much. Most highlight of the COP, previous COP, uh, one was seeing leaders coming with commitment to really discuss urgent matters. That stood out for me because there's having a high level conference and then leaders don't show up. That was the most important highlight for me, seeing all responsible people, actors, opinion leaders coming to represent. And the other issue on a personal note, uh, it was a good event, yes. It was a good event,
Thank
and
you.
we hope to see more coming up. Uh, the other thing, I would like to thank you so much for championing this. Thank you. I would like to thank the team at Green Youth Climate Fund Institution, everyone behind this. You're doing a great job, and
Thank you
we hope
very
to see more progress ahead.
Thank you very much, Manzi. We actually have a pipeline of activities, a whole work plan of activities leading to COP28 and beyond, basically. And some of the activities involve, of course, the virtual webinars, which are set to begin on the last week of February. But we also have actual implementation activities on the ground. And we've mapped out a couple of countries, basically starting from Africa, like Tanzania, Cameroon, and Nigeria, that are looking to do 1, 2, 3 initiatives and projects, basically, that are able to support young people and in regards to issues of climate finance. With that, I welcome, of course, everyone. Thank you very much, Dennis, for taking time to show up. We have a series of webinar series running from the last February of January to, of course, the last Friday of January to the last Friday of March, basically 2023. So we're going to have a array of speakers basically take us through each and every one of the climate finance session, because capacity and education are very critical and key if we are able to, of course, support and enhance the capacity of young people. So we'll have speakers on the NCQG, a session on the GCF adoption fund, the SCF reports that came out, the LGF, and basically all climate financing aspects. We're also going to look at aspects of green bonds and private sector engagement and how young people could tap into some of those opportunities. And of course, we're also going to have a session on loss and damage, because we know that we also have a loss and damage fund. But this is not the session to talk about. This is just a welcoming 2023 webinar session, a reflection sort of webinar. So we're looking to have more of this. And I'd like to really thank Dennis for taking his time to be part of this sort of reflection session on COP27. I'd like to thank the audience and the viewers from all over, wherever you're joining. And I'm hoping that we can go to engage in this, and also the virtual and also the actual project implementation that we have aligned, of course, for 2023 and beyond. So with that, I think we can put a close to this. So goodbye, good night, and see
Thank
you
you.
soon. Yes, bye.
Bye. Thank you.